All right. Coming up. Should be a slide up?
It's up.
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's not up there. That's right. So in 2023, I presented the 2022 financial statements and noted that we made a loss of about 120k. At the time, I noted we needed to be concerned but not panicked, but we needed to continue to make wise choices and that things needed to change over time. And I stated that I backed Robin and the Wardens. In 2024, when I presented the 23 financial statements, I used John Howard's expression that we needed to be alert but not alarmed, as we'd made another loss of about 140k. I noted that on average we're about $2.5 grand behind each week, and that we had reserves to last us a few years. In last year, in 2025, when I presented the 24 financial statements, we made another cash loss of about 100k, and I put this slide up. I noted that the traffic light was orange and that things needed to change. We couldn't keep going on living beyond our means. And at this point, I still back Robin and the Wardens, and to be clear, I still back them today in terms of the vision and what's going on, and that hasn't changed. And our prayer and hopes were that the giving would increase and that this year would be a positive story. And in many senses, things have changed. This chart shows a steady increase in attendance over the last few years, which is a great gospel story and really encouraging. This is what we are called to do, and I believe it is the result of the investment in ministry that we have made over the last few years. And we've been able to do that because of the previous year's surpluses. However, our problem is that this growth has not translated to increased in giving. In real terms, our giving has decreased, and in 2025, we had another loss of about 74k. Now, we are fast approaching the red traffic light, and we no longer have the luxury of time. We need real, urgent increases in giving. The fact is, by the end of this year or early next year, we'll probably run out of our reserves. The current wardens have given an undertaking that will have a mid-year review to determine what courses of actions and what changes we need to make to move forward. So with this in mind, let us work our way through the 25 financial statements. This is an extract of the income statement from the 25 financial statements. And if you look at the numbers, you can see that the total income has increased 230k from just under 1.7 mil to 1.9, which is a great and seems a little bit contradictory to what I just said. If you look at this waterfall chart, it shows the movement in income from 24 to 25. Now, to read this and understand the chart, you need to start at the bottom left-hand corner where it says start here. That's really the total of our 24 income. The blue bars represent areas of increases, while the red bar represents areas of decreases. So offertories went up 185 grand, which is great. Grant income went down 57,000, and that's because we didn't get another grant this year. And ministry event and ministry income was up about 80k compared to the prior year. So totaling 230k increase this year compared to last year. However, we actually need to drill down a little bit into congregational giving of the 1.5 mil. We've had a few specific donations towards the Next Gen role, so Peter and Ruth's role, and some of this funding was raised in 24 Gift Day to go towards their role this year. Gift Day offerings were beyond expectations and more than double last year, which is extremely pleasing. However, the funds from Gift Day are allocated to very specific projects, and that money must be used for those projects. Our weekly offerings have also increased by about 44k compared to last year. This is about 3.6% increase. However, when you take into account that inflation was actually 3.8% for the 25 year, you can see that in real terms, our giving has not kept pace with inflation. If we examine this chart, you'll see that for the last 3 of the 4 years, our weekly giving has not kept pace with inflation. The first section of the chart shows the dollar increase each year, ranging from 45 to 60k each year on average. This section shows the percentage increases compared to the prior year. The section below shows the annual inflation rate. Under that, the red and green boxes show if our giving increased above or below inflation, and while the 24 number is green, it is only a gap of 0.6%, which is smaller than the negative gap from the previous years. Our problem is that our offertories have not kept pace with inflation or the increase in numbers, but our expenses have. Now, this is an extract, well, it's not an exact extract of what's in the financials out at the welcome desk. The numbers are the same, but I've actually moved them around a little bit to pull some wage costs out of parish admin, put it into ministry waging, so all our employment costs are together so we can compare like for like numbers. And our total expenses have increased by 300k in the last 12 months, which is about 18%. Now there's a few anomalies in there, so it's probably around 10 or 12%, but that's still well above the inflation rate. For the most part, our expenses are actually fixed. We don't really have too many variable costs. The only real variable costs we have, speaking like an accountant, is our ministry activity and ministry events costs, which are directly related to ministry income that's produced. And we have a long-standing view that, for the most part, ministry should be self-funding. And in terms of our overall spend, direct ministry costs amount for about 18% of our total spend. But in real terms, the church really only funds ministry to the tune of about 50 to 60, maybe 70k per year. This is not a lot in the scheme of things, in the scheme of our budget, and it's not really a place to go looking for significant cost savings. This table is the same table as the previous slide, but I've removed all the ministry expenses and event expenses. So this is really a summary of our fixed costs. To start with, let's talk about our staffing costs. We currently employ 9 full-time and 5 part-time staff. We actually pay them appropriately, market-based salaries for the work that they do, and this is actually entirely right. However, one of the implications of employing staff is that every year their wages go up, and sometimes above inflation. This table shows our employment costs for the last few years and the annual increase in wages from the prior year. In 2025, our employment costs were just under 1.17 million, which was up 170k from the last year. Now, this was actually expected, and is due to Peter and Ruth coming into the next gen role, general salary increases, super increases. But as previously noted, we had gift day funding for those roles, and we also had some specific contributions that we knew would come in to help fund those roles. Our budget for budgeted employment costs for 2026 is just over 1.2 million, which is about another 45k increase on this year. This also includes the costs of employing Logan that we did recently. Now, you might ask the question whether that was a wise decision to employ Logan given our current financial position. That's actually a relatively easy answer to that question. It's pretty straightforward, although hopefully other questions are easy too later on. Logan's role is basically funded by the funds donated to Scripture in a separate bucket. We can only use those funds for Scripture. So the employment of Logan doesn't actually impact our current position because we can draw down on the scripture funds to cover his role. And we have about 100 grand in that scripture account that's set aside specifically for that. Now let me just preempt another question about staffing, because I've been asked this in the past. Can we not just ask staff to take a pay cut or work fewer hours to help us get through? And my response is two-part. One, we need to pay our staff a fair market wage for the work that they do, just like everyone else who goes to work is expected. And the other part is, why should we ask a few to carry the burden of many? Why would we, in my view, ask the staff to carry the burden rather than the rest of us actually giving more? Now, I must confess that I got in a little trouble recently with the diocese because I referred to the parish cost recovery charge as a tax. They reminded me it's not a tax, but a levy, and they are very different things apparently. The PCR is an amount fixed by Senate based on our income, sounds like a tax, that every church has to pay. It is based on our net operating receipts, and it covers our clergy super, some insurances, long service leave for clergy, and a number of other payments that at the bottom end of the day we would have to pay ourselves if we didn't pay the levy. So I don't think it's unreasonable that we have to pay this. It's just simply a fixed cost that we cannot avoid and do anything about. The next section to look at is our expenses from parish property used in ministry. This is not the name I've chosen, this is what the diocese groups everything under, but it's really about the costs of running the facility of the place. And you can see that while the number jumps around a bit, it has been consistently growing. And to give you an idea of what's in this account, we spent about $44,000 last year on building maintenance. We spent about $30K on cleaning, and there's also about $44,000 of depreciation costs in that account. In our parish administration costs, you can see that these have been relatively kept under control in the last few years, but the biggest item in there of $30K relates to our phone, computers and internet. So it just does cost a lot of money to keep the place open. So when you break it down, we have what our weekly fixed outgoing expenses look like. We have staffing of about $22K per week. The parish cost recovery charge of about $3.5, admin of about $4.5, so a total of about $30 to $31K. If we compare this to our average weekly offering, we can see that we have a weekly shortfall on average for the last about $3K, but for the last few years, and in the last year that got up to $6K. But just remember, I've actually excluded some numbers from this because I just wanted to focus on our weekly offertory. So gift day is not included in that number. The special donations for the next gen ministers isn't included in that number. So the real number is actually going to be less than the 6,000. So it'll be slightly better, but not by much. But you get my point, hopefully, that weekly offertory is not cutting it. Now, in the notes to the financial statements, there are some numbers about cash on hand and various liabilities and restricted funds. These are all buried in the notes. For cash and receivables, we have about $508,000. Now that number, if you're looking at the financials, I'm happy to talk to anyone about them afterwards. That excludes MDBA accounts. And again, I'll confess that I got in trouble from the diocese for calling them MEA accounts, because that's what they used to be called, but the MEA sounds much better and is easier to say. The MDBA accounts are specific accounts set up for ministry staff in respect to how they are remunerated by the church. It gives us some tax concessions, but the money is really the ministry staff's. It really should be in their bank account. So that's why it's excluded from this calculation. And just on a point on that, if they didn't get those concessions, we would actually be looking at an increase of about 20 to 30k per ministry staff member that we would have to pay them the equivalent market rate salary. So it's a very generous thing the government lets us do. Now, if we look at some of our liabilities, we've got funds held for on-payment. The main item out of that is some funds left over from missions week that is still to be paid out. We've got liabilities at the end of the year, that's 155k. Now that's quite big, but that actually includes, the majority of that is the revenue we have received in advance for Ignite. That happens in January. So we try and match the income with the expenses. So until we deliver, it sits as a liability. And we have restricted funds, which is money we've raised for specific internal purposes. So there's still some money for the Children's Ministry outdoor area and the heating and cooling project, and some income for support of Ignite. So we have about 301k to pay out. So this leaves us with about 207k to play with. And if we assume a burn rate of somewhere around 4k a week, so a little bit more optimistic than the 6k, this would mean roughly we have about 52 weeks of cash remaining. So we come to a crunch this year. We are growing, but our finances are not keeping up. This year is going to be a very difficult year. If giving does not rapidly catch up with our spending, then this year we'll have to see cuts to our spending, even though most of our costs are fixed. So, as of today, as I stand here, I don't know exactly what that future looks like, but I know the following things. 1, God is faithful. 2, Fig Tree is faithful. 3, regardless of what unfolds in the next 12 months, we know that God works for our good. And sometimes we need to go through tough times to be moulded and have our rough edges refined. And I also know that God has appointed Robin and the future wardens at this time to lead us through this season. And I trust and support them fully. So that's the end. Any questions?
Thanks, Dan. Just before we pass the microphone around, I really just want to acknowledge and honour Andrew and indeed Cheryl with our thanks and appreciation for the enormous amount of work that you put into this, Andrew. You're a full-time worker, plus you've got other commitments, a family man and a servant of the Lord in many ways across our parish family. But we're so indebted to you and so grateful for you. And we've also been very blessed over the last year or two to have a dedicated subcommittee from the Parish Council who are finance folk. And I also just want to give a nod to those members of that committee who work alongside you. You know who you are. And I wonder if we might just put our hands together in appreciation once more with Thanksgiving. Shane, would you perhaps be our roving mic? And if there's any questions for Andrew, please just put up your hand. State your name before your question, and then if you could speak your question into the microphone.
That's all right. Yeah, good.
Well, that's a pleasing outcome. Thank you, Andrew.
All right.
Andrew, I think you just need to move your report.
So I just moved, I don't have my glasses on, I can't read the wording.
I think you're just going to say, I move that the presented reports be adopted into the meeting minutes.
That sounds good.
Andrew's moved that. May I have a seconder, please? Thank you. There's a hand up, but I can't see who it is. Is that Lizzie? Oh, sweet. Lizzie Brennan.
Oh, you came.
Look at that. It's a family affair. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you again, Andrew. Thank you indeed.